the past days. Last week, we are still experiencing heavy rains, but at least at the beginning of this week, it's all sunny. And we're thankful to the Lord that people are already recovering from the devastation of that typhoon. I don't know if I'm clear.
I'm sorry?
My audio is clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm not sure my audio is clear.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we were praying for you and the church there and your community. So just glad to hear things are a little better for you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Paul. We're thankful for your prayers, Paul.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you for letting me know about that. I apologize for the delay. When I shut down my computer, it decided that's where I needed my Windows updates. So I had to wait for the for the updates to reboot. So sorry for the delay. But,
well, it gave us enough time to talk behind your back.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I know how that works. All right, so before I was, kind of reviewing those 3 steps that we looked at when we were examining our passage, and the passage we looked at last time was from Ephesians 3. So I just want to start here again, and I have you identify those prepositions quickly. We'll go through it quickly as a review, and then I want to introduce to you a particular part of speech which uses a preposition, but it's a preposition that does not introduce a prepositional phrase. It has another function. So I want to make you aware of that, because we do find them fairly regularly in Scripture. All right. So, but before we get to that, let's just identify our prepositions, and we'll just start with you, Robbie, since you're at the top of the screen. Maybe if you can just run through, go ahead and, if you can read the passage and just run through it, identify the prepositions.
Okay, in verse 14, we have for and before. And we have from. Heaven and earth. And then in verse 16, according to, or according to. Be strengthened. Then with and through and in. And then in verse 17, through, or in first, in and through. And then in again, before love. Verse 18, with. In verse 19, which.
Which?
Yeah, verse 19, which. Filled up. Two. No, which is not a preposition.
All right.
I think.
Yep, that's right.
It's followed by a verb. So
there you go. Yeah. Good. You use the check. It's a relative pronoun, but yeah, you use the check there. Right. It's followed by a verb, which does tell us it can't be a prepositional phrase.
There's one more, I think, in verse 19. It's of.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if I missed anything.
That's good. There are a couple that you missed.
Couple more?
In verse 15.
15.
Or that I didn't hear you say. Maybe you.
15?
Yeah.
In, yeah. Oh, there.
Yeah,
and
there you
on. There it is.
There you go. Yeah.
In and on.
Okay, good. Now, we had a discussion before, I think it was Pastor Entz, that identified for this reason. Normally, that's used as a subordinating conjunction, but, you know, I still need to think about this. I did not follow up on that because it is followed by a noun. Yet in English, this is typically a phrase.
Right.
Maybe it's idiomatic. It typically has the idea of therefore.
For, yeah.
Or as a result, something like that. Thus, so I'm going to keep the jury for me is out on this one as far as whether or not this is a preposition. But yeah, I think the rest of them is good. Now, I just want to make a couple observations. We're not going to go through all of these like we did before. We'll just do let's do one of them just for to kind of dust off our brains on this. Before the Father. Let's go through those 3 steps together with that. The first one was just we want to confirm that this is a prepositional phrase. So how do we do that? What do we look for?
What comes after it?
Okay.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
So it's followed by
Father.
the Father,
A noun.
which is a noun, and then the adjective or the definite article. So yes, it is followed by a noun. So this is a prepositional phrase. Then the second step is we want to identify what it's modifying. So we look at the word right before and ask, could before the Father modify knees, Paul's knees in some way? Does that make any sense?
No, doesn't.
No. So knees doesn't make sense. So we go back, we go to the word prior to that, which is bow. Could before the Father modify bow in some way?
Yes.
Yes. Could indicate where, right? Where I bow. And so that was the summary is before the Father modifies bow, telling us where. Okay. So that's the process. We're not going to go through all the prepositions, but I do want to make a few observations here. One is this. Notice how many with boot prepositions we have here. I'm just going to highlight those in another color. We've got this one, in, on, with, in, to, of, with. So again, just by...
You missed from.
Did I miss? There, thank you. From.
Yeah, 15. Yeah.
So, yeah, what is that, 15? 3, 6, 9, 10 out of the 1, 2, 3, 10 out of the 14, if we don't include for this reason, 10 out of the 14 are from a with boot. So that just to me, I want to reinforce, memorize these 9 guys, and you'll be able to, you would have caught 80% of them just by remembering these 9 prepositions. All right. That's one observation. A second observation I want to make is some prepositions are more than one word. Can you see where's an example of that in this passage?
According to.
Yeah, according to. And possibly for this reason, but like I said, we'll leave that for another day. So preposition is not only one word. There are actually several prepositions that are 2 words. So keep that in mind. According to is one example here. Another observation is notice how many prepositions are here. In these 5 verses, we have 14 prepositions in 6 verses. So you're going to see these guys a lot. I haven't counted in this passage, but I think there are more prepositions than there are conjunctions in this
Mr.
text.
Kim,
Yeah.
how about the love of Christ, the of in the love of Christ?
Oh, did we miss?
In
Oh, there you go.
Oh
See?
yeah, there it is.
The engineer
Thank you.
catches it. Yeah. That's another point for our engineers. All right. Woo! So 11 out of 15 of these. All right. So a lot of prepositions here that to keep in mind. And then another thing too, and I'm glad, Pastor Robbie, you did that sort of internal thinking when you were looking at which surpasses, is identifying these prepositions. They're going to be followed by a noun. And so that when we come across, there's a few examples here, and this is going to take us to our next discussion point. Notice there were 3 that you conspicuously skipped here. To know, to comprehend, and to be strengthened. Now that preposition to is normally, right, it's part of a with boot. So why did you not include those 3 as prepositional phrases?
Because they're infinitives, they're followed by a verb.
Yeah, notice in each case, they're followed by a verb, not a noun. All right.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about infinitives in a minute, but this is just helpful to remind us that, always check to see if there's that noun following the preposition. If you've got a verb there, you don't have a prepositional phrase. You've got something else. Go ahead.
Tim, your screen is blurring again.
Oh, what is
I think. Is it just me, or does everyone?
It's blurry with me.
All right.
Yes, mine also.
Let me see.
Yeah, it's taking time to resolve.
Must be an internet signal problem here. Let me.
Probably.
Is my face clear?
No, your face is clear. It's the screen whenever you put it.
All right, let me try sharing it again. How does it look now?
Yeah,
there it is.
Great.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're just going to have to tell me whenever it blurs, I'll just restart the sharing. I'm not sure what's going on. But at least you can see my beautiful face. So that's important. As long as that's clear.
Oh, I thought it was blurred. Just kidding.
Okay. So, what was the other? Oh, so always check what follows. All right, because again, for example, to is a very, very common preposition, yet in this case, there were 3 examples where it was not a prepositional phrase. It was what Pastor Robbie correctly noted as an infinitive. All right, so I want to talk about infinitives. They show up fairly regularly in Greek. Each of these 3 are infinitives in Greek, so this is not just an English thing. It's also in Greek, and so we want to understand these. And in basically in English, how these infinitives are identified is by, let's get to that. The form is the preposition to, and to is still called a preposition here. What we're distinguishing between is a prepositional phrase and an infinitive. To is still referred to as a preposition in both cases, but when it is followed by a verb, it is considered an infinitive. By the way, there are infinitives in Hebrew. All right. They function a little differently. There are 2 kinds of infinitives in Hebrew. So it's a little more complicated when it comes to Hebrew and how they work. But there is a part of speech in Hebrew that is an infinitive, and it has some similarities to an English infinitive. Greek and English infinitives are typically a lot closer, though there are some special cases in Greek where it functions a little differently, and it would be too technical for me to explain right now, but just know that. So for the most part, an infinitive in Greek functions similarly as an infinitive in English, or vice versa. And infinitives in Hebrew also share some similarities with that. So again, we're going to be learning something or reviewing something that is not just an English, how would you say, English-centric part of speech, all right? And in English, an infinitive is identified by to plus the verb. And typically the verb will be in its root form, all right? But not always, but typically. Okay? So how do you know if you have an infinitive? How do you know if you see the word to there, how do you know it's an infinitive and not a prepositional phrase? Harris, how do you know? What's the check for us?
Infinitives past or team are followed usually by verbs, and prepositional phrase prepositions include a noun which follows the preposition.
Okay, exactly. That's the simplest way to distinguish them. If you have to plus a noun, you are dealing with a prepositional phrase. If you have to plus the verb, then you have an infinitive. All right. Now there may be, some rare case. I can't think of any right now, so I'm not going to say always, because I know that's dangerous to say when it comes to English grammar, because there's usually some exception. But for the most part, and based on my knowledge of the language, this is a good way to distinguish between these two. Now there is, so we'll leave it there. All right, so now the infinitive is not a connector word, and that's why I want to bring it into this discussion now. It doesn't function like a prepositional phrase, a preposition in a prepositional phrase. It doesn't connect, it doesn't link the verb to something else. If you remember, in a prepositional phrase, this is where the preposition links a noun to another word in the sentence. All right. Now, in the case of an infinitive takes on a whole new, it functions very differently than a prepositional phrase. It does modify something in the sentence, but the way it functions is a little different. So we'll go through some examples, and then if you have any questions, of course, you can ask. But just think of the important thing I want to point out here is the infinitive is not a connector word like a normal preposition is. It is what's called a verbal. In English, there's a category of a part of speech that's called a verbal. And verbals are simply this. There are words that are formed using a verb, but they don't act exactly like a regular verb. Okay? If they're not like present indicative active or past tense, imperative, passive. They're not, they don't have that same breakdown or characteristic. Now, there are three verbals in the English language. The first is participle, which we're going to cover, Lord willing, sometime in the future. It's one of the connector words we're going to look at. We have discussed them in class before. Participle is simply a verb that ends in ing or ed, and it functions like an adjective or an adverb. That means that a participle is not like a regular verb that describes an action and having a subject. All right. In fact, I'm going to even note that. It does not have a subject like I'll call it a regular verb. Okay. It does point, there is a subject involved in the action in the sentence, but a participle does not have a subject itself. All right. Because a participial phrase, which is a participle plus an object of the participle, it modifies something else in the sentence. It may modify a noun. That would be, for example, the man being tall bumped his head. Okay? This is being here is a participle, and it modifies man. It's describing the man. All right. So in that case, Manny, how is it functioning? If it's describing the man and the man is a noun, how would this being tall function grammatically?
Does it functions like a adjective?
Yes. It functions like an adjective because it's modifying a noun. Okay, we could have had another situation where you know, I do this example a lot, but I went home walking all the way. In this case, the participle walking is modifying went. It's saying how I went home. So in this case, Manny, how is it functioning? As an adjective or an adverb?
It's an adverb.
Yeah, okay. So this is just, and normally what you'll see in scripture, at least in my experience, it seems like participles more often modify verbs than they do nouns. Okay, but so that's a participle. It will function like an adjective or an adverb. There is the second verbal that we have is the infinitive, and that's what we're going to look at in detail this morning. The infinitive can function like a noun or an adjective or an adverb. It's a very interesting kind of part of speech in English. It actually is very versatile. You'll see infinitives used in a lot of different ways. Even when they function like a noun, they can function as a subject of a sentence, as a direct object of a sentence, as an indirect object of a sentence. They're just a variety of uses, but they can also function like an adverb or an adjective. And again, an infinitive, user error. Infinitive also does not have a subject, like a regular verb. Okay? So, keep that in mind. Now, this is where it deviates in Greek. Greek does have a case where the object of the infinitive is the subject. It's kind of like a special case. All right, so we're not going to go into that. I'm just telling you that there is a situation in Greek where there's an interesting way of infinitive, how it functions. All right, but most of the time in Greek, it's not like that. It functions in the same way as in English, or similar to an English infinitive. And then finally, there's what's called a gerund. Now, a gerund will look like a participle. But a gerund is different than a participle in that a gerund functions like a noun. Okay? So let me give you some examples. We've already looked at the example of the participle. An infinitive, again, is I want to walk home. Okay, that would be an example using the verb walk. Is the case, this is an infinitive. And then a gerund would be something like this. Walking home is what I did. It's an awkward sentence in English, but here walking is not a participle. It's actually functioning like a noun. Walking home is the subject of this sentence. Okay, so the subject here is actually walking home. The verb is. And then the object here is the phrase what I did. Okay, this is a weird sentence a little bit, but here walking home is functioning like a noun. Now, in Greek, there are no gerunds. All right, so this is just an English, a verbal that we see in English. So in Greek, you are going to see infinitives and participles. To my knowledge, there are no Greek gerunds. Now, you may find some gerunds in an English translation of Scripture, but like I said, in my understanding, I don't think there are any gerunds in Greek grammar. So I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure my studies that that's the case. All right, so we're just going to be looking at participles and infinitives in English because those are there's a parallel in the Greek language for that. Okay, so any questions on this? These are the three English verbals. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tim, even if there wasn't a gerund in the Greek, when we see that in the English translation, we'll treat that as a gerund, like the equipping of the saints for the work of service. So we'll treat that still as a gerund.
Yeah.
Right?
So how does that?
That.
He gave some for the equipping. Yeah. So in this case, that's a great. Thank you for bringing that up. This is an example of the English language equipping. Notice it's the verb equip. Okay, this is from Ephesians chapter 3, verse I think 13 or 14. Equipping. Notice we have equip plus ing, and in this case, it's functioning as a noun, right?
Right.
He gave some for the equipping. In fact, for is a preposition here. So equipping is the object of the preposition. Now, the question is, if in Greek, I'll just look it up real quick. I imagine that's just simply a noun in Greek.
Yeah, it is.
Ephesians chapter, 4, 4:13.
Yeah.
Or is it 4:12? 4:12. Yeah, so if you look at, so that is just a noun.
Yeah.
All right, and it's not any type of verb form. It's a noun form. The ending there is an accusative ending. So that's a typical Greek noun. All right. Now it probably comes from it comes from a verb. Its root is from a verb, artizo, but this would be seen simply as a noun. All right. Now in English, it's translated as a gerund. Okay. And even we have to the building up in that same verse. Right. And again, that is a noun. It comes from the Greek noun oikos, which is a building. This is oikodome, which is domestic, a domestic building. And it is part of it's an object of the preposition. There's a preposition eis, which means to or unto. It's a purpose preposition. All right. And again, it's translated in English as a gerund. Okay. So I guess, it probably would benefit us to talk about gerunds since you are going to see that in the English translation. And how would you figure out if you have a gerund or a participle? What do you guys think? So I've got this. I've got for the equipping of the saints, for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ. Okay. Whoops, I spelled that. So, how do we figure this out?
It really functions like a noun.
Yeah. It's following a preposition, right?
Yeah.
And notice, in each case, there's a very, very important word that comes right before it that tells you. Yeah, Tabs, I could read your lips.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tabs. The. You see that? Now, the is a definite article that always
definite article.
What? Does the ever modify a verb?
No.
No.
A noun.
Only a noun. So there's your big clue right there.
Right.
That's the biggest one. Okay. So we know that in this case, we do have an ing, a verb with an ing, but we know that it's not a participle because, for so we could say, look for an article. You won't always see an article. Like this example I gave you, walking home is what I did. There's no article there. So you wouldn't know that. What you would have to do in this sentence is ask yourself, okay, I have the verb there. I can see that. So how is this? Home is not the subject because it's not saying home is what I did. It's saying walking home is what I did. So it's functioning like a subject here. So that means by definition, it has to be a noun. Subjects are nouns in English.
Then what happens if you remove the word? This just for discussion. What happens when you remove the word the for equipping the saints for service?
Okay, so
is it still a gerund? Oh no, wait.
Yeah, now it becomes a little more difficult, except you still have this preposition in front of it. Participles are not led by a preposition.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that's your next clue. So you look for an article, then look for preposition.
Okay.
Okay.
That's right. There you go.
So those would be your clues. All right. Any questions on that? So you will see gerunds in the English translation. I guess I should qualify that. Let me just write that as another footnote here. There are no gerunds in Greek, but there are English translations of Greek words that are gerunds. Does that make sense? Like we saw, for example, in Ephesians 4:12. So it would be helpful for us to note. And so here you go. I mean, this is what makes English such a fun language and why you guys get nosebleeds when we do this, because now you're looking for, you could have equipping. Let's just take equipping. So we have the for the equipping of the saints. All right. In this case, we identify this as a gerund, right? Now, what if we had Paul taught in the church equipping the saints? Okay, this is not a great English sentence, but in this case, it's functioning as a participle. Okay, it's describing the result of what he taught. Okay, or we could have I am equipping the saints. Now I'm using it as a regular verb with the helper am. So you've got this ing verb that can be used in 3 different ways. How do you know which one? All right, well, in the case of the gerund, we look for, the article, look for preposition, or identify if it's the subject of the sentence. Those are ways. The participle won't have a subject or a preposition before it. All right?
Yep.
And in this case, usually with ing words, usually it will have a helper verb. Okay? In English, that's how.
Yeah.
I did. Now in Greek, it's so much easier. Oh, Greek is so wonderful, brothers. I want to preach a devotion on Greek right now. I'm just so moved. Because in Greek, it's clear. A participle will have a specific kind of, the term conjugation. The verbs are conjugated, meaning you can tell the tense of a verb, the mood, the voice in Greek just by the ending of the verb. There's different endings. All right. So it's really easy. You don't have this English problem where you have the same ending ing that could be different things. All right. In Greek, it's very nice. And then in Greek, the infinitive is a different ending as well. All right. So the infinitive or the participle, they're all conjugated differently. So there's no confusion in that sense in Greek.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm, you know, praise God that he chose Greek instead of English as the, you know, language of Scripture, at least the New Testament,
Right.
because I think it's a lot more precise. Now, Greek has its own, you know, special cases and special rules and all that. Every language does as it evolves. You know, it does things like that. But in the case of verbs, Greek's wonderful. Hebrew, not so much. Hebrew is does have different endings depending on the kind of verb. So you can distinguish, let me think. You can distinguish in Hebrew, identify participles and infinitives and regular verbs, but the interpretation is a lot more challenging in Hebrew. But English has these, you know, unfortunately, you can have this ing ending and it can be three different possibilities. So just keep that in mind. And that's why, man, the interlinear can be such a helpful tool, because then you can just go to the interlinear and see, oh, it's an infinitive. All right. Oh, it's a participle. Oh, it's an imperative. So that's the helpfulness of the interlinear. Now, as we've talked about before, interlinear, you also have to be careful with interlinears, because we don't know that much Greek grammar, so we can get ourselves in trouble if we're not careful. I was using the illustration the other day. It's like when I was helping out in a particular ministry for homeless people or people that were trying to get back on their feet, and we were helping to build or remodel a building for them to live in. And there was a friend of mine there, and he had never used a nail gun. You know that it's pressurized. It can pop in the nails like a gun, and you know, it's great, right? It's much better than a hammer. Well, this guy had never used one before, and so, you know, this is all volunteer help, right? We're not getting paid, so they just hand this guy a nail gun, and he's starting to nail stuff in, but he's pointing it around, and he's not being careful. He kept his hand on the trigger, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to hold the handle. It's like a real weapon. And then as you're ready to hammer, that's when he had his hand on the trigger. And so as he was placing the board, he nailed his hand to the board.
Oh boy.
So he's like, you know, see, he did not understand the tool he was using, and he did not have enough respect for it. And so he, you know, got injured. He ended up being okay, but he had to go we just took him to the hospital with the board nailed to his hand. So we didn't want to take it out without the doctor doing that. But it's the same with Greek, you know, with interlinears. It's like a nail gun. Okay. It can be very helpful, but just treat it with caution, because sometimes you may think you have a result or an idea, and if you don't know the Greek grammar, you could be interpreting something wrong. So that's where use the interlinear, but also use it in conjunction with the English translations.
Right.
So if you see something in Greek, it's like, oh, look, this is an infinitive, but they translated it as a regular verb. That's wrong. Well, look at the English translations first.
Right.
And you may find, I can't remember the example I was talking about, I would show it to you. But basically, in the Greek, like I said, there is a special case where it's an infinitive, but it actually can look like a regular subject and verb. And So this person went off on, and this is an infinitive. It's translated wrong. Well, I said, brother, look at the English translation. So we looked at 6 translations. They were all the same. And so I said, look, yes, it's an infinitive, but there's a rule of Greek grammar that you don't know, but these guys do. So that's why all of them, these are all Greek experts. They all translated it this way. Don't think you found something they missed. All right. So that's just a reminder. We use the interlinear. It can be very helpful, but also the English translations are going to be a guide as well. Okay. So keep that in mind. But like that said, the interlinear can be very helpful. And in fact, I'll show you if we have time today, when we look at a passage, I'll show you the interlinear. And again, we'll see that the infinitives, it's interesting how the English translations, what they do with that sometimes. So any case. All right. So we talked about these ing verbs. How would you tell the difference? Now let's look at a few examples of how these infinitives can function. As I told you, participles can function like an adjective or an adverb. That is, they could modify a noun or a verb. Infinitives actually can also function as an adjective or an adverb, but also as a noun. Very interesting part of speech. So here we have, I love to eat. Tabs, tell me how there's the infinitive, to eat, because notice eat is following the preposition to. How is this infinitive functioning in the sentence? Oh, I have the answer right there.
as a noun.
As an object? I'll get back to you. I've got some other. Okay. This is the part where I just show you the examples. Then I'll have you guys do one in a minute. Okay.
Okay.
So notice here, I love to eat. It's functioning as a noun in this case. It's the object. It's receiving the action. The action is love. What do I love? I love to eat. So it's an object in this case. Here's another example of a noun where it's the infinitive, to walk, is functioning as the subject in this sentence. To walk is good for your health. Okay? Again, notice we have the verb is, and then good is the predicate adjective. All right? And then to walk is functioning as the subject here. And again, by definition, a subject has to be a noun. It's a person, place, or thing. In this case, it's a thing, to walk. So an infinitive can be used as a noun, as either an object of a sentence, a subject of a sentence. An infinitive can be used as an adverb. Notice these examples. I came to preach. It's modifying came. Why I came. I used the bat to hit the ball. Here it's functioning as an adverb, modifying used, saying how I used, or why I used the bat, or how I used it. Okay? So that's an adverb. In both of these examples, it's modifying the verb in the sentence. The infinitive can also function as an adjective. Here's an example. The woman to call is the pastor's wife. Which woman? It's describing the woman. Okay? So that's why it's an adjective in this case. And then finally, an infinitive can be used as a predicate adjective. If you remember, when we have a sentence, there's two kinds of sentences, a verb, two kinds of verbs. A verb, it's an action, or a verb of being. Okay, and when it's a verb of being, let me do it this way. If it's a verb of action, it will have an object. It'll have something receiving an action. If it's a verb of being, it'll be followed by a predicate adjective or nominative. Okay, it's not an object. It's not something receiving an action. It's a word that's describing the subject. Right? So in this case, that's exactly what we have here. To preach is functioning as a predicate adjective. It's describing the desire. Okay? Any questions on these examples? Everyone okay? So notice the infinitive is extremely versatile in how it works. And that is unfortunately what makes it hard when you're going through a passage. And you see this infinitive and you go, okay, what's it doing here? Because you need to identify what it's doing in order to determine if it's modifying something. Because notice here, when it works as a noun, it's not modifying anything. Okay? Now, when it works as an adverb or an adjective, it is modifying something. But when it functions as a predicate adjective, it's not modifying something as well. You see that? Actually, here, I'm sorry, this is probably a predicate nominative. It's functioning as a noun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay.
oh, you caught that?
Yeah, I was gonna ask why that was an adjective, and really it was functioning like a noun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. So thankfully I caught it before you, so I didn't have to be embarrassed, you know. But thanks, you keep me honest. All right, so this is why an infinitive is something we have to pay attention to, because in some cases it is modifying and that will affect our diagram. Like, for example, in this case, if we take to walk is good for your health, this is the subject of the clause. So you would not have it modifying something. Whereas here, I use the bat. Here you would have it modifying. Used, right? In this case, the woman to call, technically you would have it like this. It's modifying woman. So it'd be the woman is the pastor's wife. That's the main sentence. To call is modifying woman. All right. But in my desire is to preach, you wouldn't do this. It's not modifying is. It's not modifying desire. It's actually the predicate nominative. It completes the statement. It's describing the desire. My desire is to preach. Okay, so that's why we got to pay attention, because we're going to be confronted with these in our passage, and we'll have to ask ourselves, okay, I see it's an infinitive because we have to followed by a verb, but what's it doing here? Is it modifying something or not? And the way you figure that out, let me just ask the question this way. How do I know if the infinitive is modifying something else in the sentence? What would be the answer to that question? Does anybody know?
Well, the way we tell how a prepositional phrase, if a phrase is a prepositional phrase, look at the word before it.
Okay.
Or the phrase before it.
Yeah, that would be the process, but you have to ask yourself one more question before that in the case of an infinitive. Because, for example, because an infinitive, it can function as an adjective or an adverb, and in those cases, it does modify, but if it functions as a noun, it does not modify. All right, so you need to check to see if it is functioning as a noun. Maybe a subject or an object or, you know, predicate nominative. Okay?
Yeah.
If it is, then it's not modifying.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's what you got to look for. All right. And in some of the passages I've got for examples, we'll see that. Okay. All right. Now here, Now is when I put you guys on the spot. Who was it? Tabs? All right. So in this case, I want you to, oh, let me do this. Identify, first tell me, is this a preposition or an infinitive? And then tell me, how does it function in the sentence? All right, Tabs. So in this case, notice the answer is not here for you. You have to come up with it.
Okay. I will try my best, Pastor.
Okay.
I went to the store. Is it a preposition or an infinitive? I went to the store. I think it is a preposition, Pastor,
Okay. And why would you say that?
because it is telling me where I went.
Okay, but an infinitive could,
Oh,
or could it? There's something else here that's even, I think, gives you, what's that first thing I told you guys to look for? If you have a preposition, prepositional phrase, or an infinitive in a prepositional phrase, what will to be followed by?
if it's a preposition, it will be followed by a noun, Pastor?
Yes.
Okay.
And then an infinitive is to plus a verb. What do we have here in this case?
It's a noun, Pastor.
Okay, so that's why it's a prepositional phrase. All right.
Okay.
That's
Yes,
an easy check. That's the first thing we want to identify. It's a prepositional phrase, and yes, it's telling us where I went. All right, so that's how it's functioning. But it's not an infinitive because this is not a verb.
It's not a verb.
Okay?
Yes, Pastor.
Right. Good. All right, Harris, I'm going to give this one to you. I want to speak. Prepositional phrase or infinitive?
It's an infinitive, Pastor Tim.
Okay, and how do you know that?
It's followed by a verb, speak.
Yes. Okay, it's followed by a verb. So we have, and then how is it functioning here? I told you these are tricky. So think about the sentence here. You've got a subject, I.
Verb, object, Pastor.
Yes, there you go. It's functioning as the object. Okay, it's the object of the action. Want. What do I want? I want to speak. Think of it this way. If you were to replace it with I want durian. Right?
Yeah.
I want love. Okay? These are objects. So to speak is the object of the action. So, okay? See that? So, and that means in this case that it's functioning as a noun, isn't it? It's not modifying something else because it's a noun in this case. Any questions on that, guys? Okay, let's try another example. Manny said his signal wasn't very good. Robbie, I'll have you do this one. To wait is hard for those who are impatient. Is this an infinitive or preposition? You're muted, by the way.
Oh, okay. That's an infinitive acting as a subject.
Okay, good. It's an infinitive because notice wait is a verb and it is acting as a subject. All right, good. Now here's where in English, a gerund can also act the same way. Do you see that? Waiting is hard for those. In this case, it's a gerund because it's the verb plus the ing. Now, it's functioning the same way. It's just technically a different part of speech, but it's also a verbal. Why? Because there's a verb, wait, that's not acting like a verb. Okay? All right. Robbie, why don't you go ahead and take this one too?
Okay. He agreed to give me a ride. That is a participle that's acting like an object.
I assume you meant infinitive, not participle.
I'm sorry, infinitive. That's right. Yeah.
That is acting like
as an object.
Object. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the receiving the action of the verb. Okay. That's a little bit tricky. And me here, by the way, what's me doing?
It's an indirect object.
Yeah. It's an indirect object of what? Of agreed?
Of the object. No, to give.
Yeah. And a ride is what? So he is the subject. Agreed is the verb. To give me a ride is the object. Okay? And that's made up of an infinitive, the indirect object, the infinitive, and the direct object of the infinitive.
Object of the infinitive.
Yeah. Yeah. English. Oh, yeah. Anyway. So, but what I like here about it is it's clean in the sense that, okay, you know, what we're looking for is phrases and clauses, right? That's all. That's what we're after to do the diagramming. So when I diagram this, when I understand, oh, okay, this is the object. So it's subject, verb, and this whole thing is the object. I'll just do this to identify it.
Right.
That's helpful because now I know, okay, when I diagram this, I'm just including this whole thing on one line. This is the independent clause. Yeah. Now, if I had said he gave me a ride in his car to the park. Okay. What do I do with these? All right. Well, I've got my prepositions here. How do I know these are prepositions, Pastor Robbie?
Because they're followed by nouns.
Okay. And so I got my connector words. And the next step is I just break up the sentence.
Right.
But I leave this first one alone because I know that's my subject, verb, object. Okay. Even though I got lots of, I got another verb here. I got a preposition here. I got, you know, if I just step back and think a minute, okay, I've got a preposition here too, but is it a prepositional phrase? No, because there's a verb. Okay. That means it's an infinitive. Okay. How's this infinitive working? He agreed to give, it's the object. So it's working like a noun. It's the object of the sentence. So this is all one sentence. Now in his car tells me it's modifying how he gave me the ride, and to the park is modifying, or maybe where or how, and to the park is where. All right. Now, to give is a verbal, so even though It's functioning as a noun here, but it is being modified in its verbal sense. Okay? It's not that he agreed in his car. We don't put it over here because that's not where he agreed to give the ride. That's where he gave the ride, or how he gave the ride. See that?
Doesn't it modify ride? Can it modify ride?
Well, except that the question that this answers is where or how. So that means it has to modify a verb. So
that's right. That's right. Okay.
So in this case, an infinitive, and I don't know if I'm saying this, technically correctly or not, but it's a verbal, so it does have some elements of a verb, but it's functioning in the sentence as a noun. It's functioning that way here, but it is a word that's being modified because it is describing an action in a sense, right? To give me right, it's describing an action in a sense, and therefore it can be modified like a normal verb would be. Okay, yeah, it's getting complicated, isn't it? These infinitives are nasty. They're nasty. Okay, gone are the days of this nice simple subject verb object, and those days are gone, brothers. This is biblical exegesis for real men right here. All right. Like Steve Lawson says, there's no wimps here in this studying of the Bible, right? We don't have, this is not, sissy exegesis. This is for real men. Okay. But, I think, again, as you keep working at this and identify these things, it will help you to be more accurate in your understanding of what's going on here. Okay. Sometimes it won't make a huge difference as you interpret the passage because you sort of have a sense for what's going on, but I just want to help you be more precise, and it'll protect you. It's a better protection from error if you can be as precise as possible. It may not affect, how things roll out when you preach the passage before you, as far as is this an infinitive or a preposition, because you may identify what it's modifying correctly and not state whether it's a infinitive or prepositional phrase, because that you're not going to be using this language in your sermon, right? You're not going to be talking about prepositional phrases and infinitives functioning as a predicate nominative. You're not going to say any of that in your sermon, right? All right. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
All right. But you do need to know that as the exegete. You do need to be able to understand that. So then that will only protect you from being, protect you from error, or be a help to that. Okay. All right. So he agreed to give me a ride to the park. Oh yeah. So here, actually in the next example, I added that. In this case, so we already did that. To, in this case, the second to is functioning as the second to here is functioning as a preposition. The first to is part of an infinitive.
Preposition.
Okay. So here we have a sentence where the word preposition to is functioning two different ways. All right. Okay. What do we have time-wise? Let's try to do a passage together here. Athan, how's your audio? You think would you be able to do this? Is your audio okay?
My audio is okay, but I still need to get refreshed on
okay.
I can't see it.
All right.
to catch up.
Okay, no problem. Brother Tabs, I'll come back to you on this one then. And just identify the infinitives. What's that?
I'm still reading the previous notes.
Oh, okay.
Oh boy.
No problem. All right, Brother Tabs,
Yes, Pastor.
let's identify the infinitives in this
And
sentence.
how okay, Pastor. Ephesians 5:10-12. Trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them, for it is disgraceful even to speak of the things which are done by them in secret. Identify the infinitives. Um, I think, Pastor, the infinitives are to learn, and in verse 10, and then to speak. Oh, there, to speak.
Okay. How do you know those are infinitives?
Because the to is followed by a verb.
Okay, good. Learn and speak. Now, what about this one? To the Lord. Is that an infinitive?
It's a preposition, Pastor, because it's followed by a noun.
Okay, good. Now, just remember, technically speaking, the word to is always going to be called a preposition. All right.
Okay.
But to the Lord is a prepositional phrase. To learn is an infinitive. So just, so to will always be referred to as a preposition. All right. But to learn, we call that an infinitive. And to the Lord, we call that a prepositional phrase. So it is a phrase, right? It's not a clause because there's no verb. It's a phrase that's introduced by a preposition. All right, so that's just the technical language. But yeah, so to learn is an infinitive. So this is not a clause. It's a verbal. So the next thing we want to ask ourselves is, how is to learn functioning here? It's an infinitive, that's correct.
Yes, Pastor.
But our next question is, all right, how does it function? You have three possibilities: noun, adverb, or adjective.
Okay. Trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. I think, Pastor, if I'll try. I think because is the word trying is a verb. I think it's functioning as an adverb to trying.
Okay, trying is a verb. What kind of verb? Most likely?
A participle.
Yeah, and we need verse 9 to confirm that. So trying is a participle. So we have to learn as the object of this participle. Right? What if we had said trying Greek, trying dinner, trying my patience? Okay, what are these words? How are they functioning?
Objects, Pastor.
Yeah, they're nouns, right? So trying to learn.
It functions as an object.
Yeah.
So
Object of trying. See that?
okay.
Now, actually, technically, it's trying to learn what is pleasing.
Okay.
Is the whole phrase or clause in this case. Trying to learn what is to learn what is pleasing is the object of trying.
Okay.
Or we could say the sentence this way: I try to learn what is pleasing. All right. That's a little easier to. So here, to learn what is pleasing, that's my object. So again here, and so it's the similar here. Trying to learn, it's the object of the participle. Participles, and that's where participles have this. They're a verbal, so they're not exactly like a regular verb, but they do have objects like a regular verb. but they don't have a subject like a regular verb.
Mhm.
And that's the difference.
Okay.
Okay. All right, good. Any questions on that?
Pastor, would it help if we rephrase the like what you did there? Will it help if we can like verse 10, if we rephrase it in a simpler way, will it help us identify it better?
It might. I try to do this like I did with these examples. I just say, okay, what if I put another word in there? Because it wouldn't be, you wouldn't have, you know, trying quickly, like an adverb. Now, if it had said trying quickly to learn, oh, now it's getting real fun. But I just think about, okay, what would this, how would I normally, what would normally follow this kind of a word?
Okay.
Part of this is just going to be experience with it. You know, as now you're looking for this, and as you see it, the more you're aware of and the more practice you do. This is why practicing diagramming is so important, because it'll force you, you're going to be confronted with this kind of stuff. And you're going to have to be so now if you're aware of, okay, now there's this thing called infinitives. Oh, infinitive, what was that? Oh yeah, it's to followed by a verb. Oh, I have an infinitive here. What's it doing? All right.
Yes,
Now before, when we were just in the world of prepositions, you know, everything was lovely because, you know, we just knew, oh, it's a prepositional phrase. But now we realize it's not, because there's this verb here. Now, even to speak, how about that one? How's to speak working here? It is disgraceful to speak.
Or it is disgraceful even to speak. I think, Pastor, it's an infinitive functioning as the subject.
Okay, it's it's actually speaking of what it is here, right? To speak is disgraceful. That's what he's saying. But he's using the demonstrative pronoun it is referring to speak. So it is functioning as a noun here. All right. Now, here's what I want to do. Okay, as we've talked about before, you always want to, let's verify things. One, we can look at other translations. So let's do that. Just to see, okay, are these, okay, can you see my, my Logos, my Bible software? Is that showing?
Yes, Pastor.
Okay. Is it blurry?
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Somewhere in between, Pastor.
In between. Okay. Is it clear enough?
Because it's small.
Oh, it's small?
Somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's clear enough, but it's small.
Okay, let me do this. I'll try to expand it a little and increase the size. How's that?
Yeah.
Is that better?
I think, yeah.
Okay, we're in
Marginally.
Ephesians. Boy, tough crowd here. Okay, now let's look at this. Trying to learn. Now notice, okay, as I've told you before, New American Standard, we got a footnote here. What is it saying there in the footnote? It's saying literally, it's proving what? What is that?
It's a participle.
It's a participle, no infinitive.
Yeah.
It's literally proving what is pleasing to the Lord. Okay, let's see what, so the NAS is telling us they actually changed this a little bit to make it easier to, more understandable. Let's look at ESV. What did they do? And try to discern. So they use it as a participle, but notice the verb here is a regular verb, not a participle. Yeah. You guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, let me help for the old man's eyes here. Let me increase the size. All right, try to discern. Okay, that's different than trying to learn. All right, let's see what New King James does. Finding out. Okay, now they translate it as a participle only. No infinitive there. Let's look at the Net Bible. Trying to learn. Okay, same as the New American Standard. Let's throw in the Holman. Holman's not a bad. Oh, nuts.
Yeah.
Holman's a good translation. I'm using it a little more now. It's a Baptist, Southern Baptist translation, but okay, discerning. That's interesting. Participle, no infinitive. Okay, now here's an example, guys, where we have, actually, this is pretty different. New American Standard has participle plus infinitive. English Standard has regular verb plus infinitive. New King James has participle only. The Holman has participle only. The Net Bible has so you see we have three different approaches here. So let's see what let's check the interlinear.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to open up.
It's a participle.
Okay, yeah, so you already checked it. Let me just
see what's on this.
Open it up to, here we go. All right, hopefully you can see, you guys, can you see the, can everybody see my interlinear?
Discerning.
No, it's kind of
still
small.
Resolving. Yeah, it's still resolving.
Present participle active.
Okay, so let's see, I'm trying to increase the size here. All right, how's that?
There it is.
All right, let's look. Notice, here's the word. Translate literally, discerning what is pleasing. Let's look at the present participle active. There's no infinitive here, fellas. Oh, I did all that work in English, but I didn't have to. Ah. So the Holman translation actually is probably the best one here. Now, trying to learn carries the same idea, but technically, it is less correct as far as matching the Greek, the actual Greek word, which again, very clearly states it's a present participle active. So we confirmed it is a participle, but there's no, if you look down here, there's no infinitive, right?
Yeah.
And then notice discerning what is pleasing is actually the object of discerning. Okay, so that goes together. And then here's that to the Lord, which is, this is a preposition. And here's a trick in Greek, prepositional, the idea of a preposition is not always expressed in a preposition, because here it's a certain case called the dative. So that's why I'm saying that you got to really know Greek grammar to fully understand what's going on here. So if you were to look along here, you wouldn't see, oh, there's no, hey, it doesn't say preposition. This can't be a preposition. Well, that's not true. It is a prepositional phrase to the Lord because it is in the dative case.
Yeah.
All right. So this is why I'm telling you, remember, you got a nail gun here. Be careful. All right. And like I said, the way you check that out is if you look at every single English translation, it says to the Lord, to the Lord, to the Lord, to the Lord. There's no difference. So it is a prepositional phrase, even though you don't see a Greek preposition here. It's because it's in a certain case called the dative, which by its own definition, means it has a prepositional phrase idea. Okay? So now let's look at the other preposition that you noticed, to speak. Or not preposition, sorry, infinitive. And as we examine down, we go along, and at the end of verse 12 is the word to mention or to speak. And notice here, what's it say?
Present infinitive active.
It is an infinitive. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
I didn't waste my time on that one. All right. So this is an infinitive in the Greek, to speak, or this, they translate it here to mention. And then we could go and check every translation again. I'll just read it to you. In ESV, it's to speak. New King James, to speak. Net Bible, the things they do in secret are shameful, even to mention. So there it's also in Holman, to mention. So every single English translation is an infinitive, interprets it as an infinitive. All right. So, all right. So,
going back to trying to learn, once you see that it's different in the different translations, and then go to the interlinear, and then begin to see that it's just really one word, is it safe to assume that the translation just used that phrase to describe that one word?
Yes, exactly. That's what it's doing.
Yeah.
So the New American Standard translators thought that trying to learn would be a clearer interpretation or clear translation of this word, as opposed to just saying discerning.
Right.
And Documadzo has the idea of testing, to test something. So it can have this idea of testing, of learning, they use discerning here. Again, you just have to proving. That's a common translation. In fact, this is the word that's used in 2 Timothy 2:15, I believe, when it says, you know, to be approved by God. It's basically being tested, being examined by God. So in any case, and this is why, so, you know, some guys say, well, why don't we just skip to the interlinear? We can save ourselves all this. Well, because I want you to know what the other English translations are doing. Because if you just jump to the interlinear and you don't check the other English translations, you might come up with something wrong.
Right. That's
okay. Right. And so notice here, for to speak, every translation was consistent. To the Lord, every translation was consistent. But discerning, there was no consistency. We had 3 different approaches. So that tells you that, okay, I think that's showing me something. Okay, I go to and see it's just a participle, so I can be safe to just identify that as a participle. And what do participles do? They function as an adjective or an adverb. So they're modifying a noun or a verb somewhere else in the sentence. Okay? And that's where then it connects to our diagramming in the sense that we then determine, okay, what word is it modifying? How does it modify that word? But we want to know what it is first, because if it's a participle, I mean, that takes us back to what I was saying earlier. Participle can function as an adjective or an adverb. An infinitive can function as an adjective or an adverb or a noun.
Or a noun.
Prepositional phrase is going to modify, can modify a verb or a noun, typically a verb. But it can modify a noun, depending on context, depending on the sentence. So understanding what kind of phrase or word you're dealing with can help you in determining, you know, the next steps and how to figure out what's being modified. Okay. But here I just this verse was a good exercise in kind of seeing how we use all of these tools together. We don't just run the easy route and just say, okay, I'm just going to look at the interlinear. I'm going to skip all these. Or we don't want to ignore the interlinear.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So I think this is a good place to sort of end here. I think that's enough to chew on a little bit. And next week we'll pick it up here. I want to look at a couple more verses with infinitives just to kind of get you.
Next year, you mean?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you guys about as far as schedule.
Oh.
I'm happy to meet next week with you if you would like, before and then take a break. If you want to take a break, now for the rest of the month, I'm doing this to serve you guys, so I want to do whatever is easiest for you, and I don't want this to be some sort of obligation that you feel that could affect your other ministries. So maybe Pastor Robbie, why don't you tell me what would you prefer?
The other guys can, if they still want to meet next week. It's just that we who are part of the eldership in GLCC will not be around, because we will be having our a Christmas gathering for lunch next Thursday. So that's the reason why. Usually on Thursdays our meetings are 2:30, but for next week, which will be the last time that we will be meeting as an eldership for the year, we will be having a lunch with our wives at the center. But if the other brothers who are not part of the GLCC leadership team would still like to meet, it's really up to them. We would like to be there if you're going to continue this. We would not want to miss this.
Okay.
And that's why I was earlier proposing maybe we could resume next year so we don't miss this. But we can watch your video and just read your notes if the rest would want to.
Well, I'm fine either way.
Next week.
I mean, Athan's trying to catch up on the videos, so maybe that'll give him time to to catch up a little.
Right.
And again, like I said, I'm not offended or feel the need to have to meet. I want to do what's going to be most helpful for you guys. So yeah, we can take a break from here and just pick it up on January 7th.
Right.
Because that'll be the first Thursday in January. Will that be okay?
Yeah.
So that's 4-week break then, basically. Works for you guys?
Right.
Okay.
If I might suggest, and the other guys might crucify me for this, but so that when we meet in January, we're not going to be starting from scratch, coming in from the cold again. You just might want to give us a simple assignment, just to exercise what we learned. This was a great exercise, by the way, as far as I'm concerned. But if that's okay with the guys, those who can do this, do the assignment. It's like an optional thing, but it might help so that we don't get rusty over the next few weeks.
Okay. Yeah. What I can do is I'll just I'll assign a passage and just have you identify the conjunctions, prepositions, and infinitives in the passage, and then if you can identify how they're functioning, I'll just we can do that, and then we'll use that as our starting point next time we gather.
Right.
Okay. Sure. So I'll just put that on our Facebook Messenger group message and say Pastor Robbie's requiring a homework assignment from everybody. That you must do, or you will be kicked out of the church. Yes, I'm washing my hands. I have nothing to do with this.
You're washing your hands, Pontius Pilate.
So no, but yeah, of course it's optional. Again, this is all just what can be most helpful to you. But yeah, I'll pick a passage.
Yeah.
You know.
I think that will be helpful.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. So I guess that means then we wish you guys a Merry Christmas, and everything that's happened this year. You know, when it becomes 2021, that doesn't mean everything changes. I hate to tell you that. COVID does not have a calendar, and okay, it's the end of 2020. Well, I guess I'll stop. But hopefully, you know, the Lord has taught us a lot this year, and you know, none of this has happened without purpose, and none of this has happened outside of His control. So it's been a very different year for me too, obviously, because I'm traveling a lot. Normally, I would have seen you guys once or twice, and I really miss you guys. So I've been thankful for these sessions, but it's not the same. So
not the same.
But thank you, men. This has really been fun for me. It's challenged me a lot. I'm learning a lot. Hopefully I'm learning it correctly, so I'm telling you the right thing. But so I just want to express my appreciation for our times together, and hope that next year the Lord will allow things to open up sooner rather than later, so that we can fellowship in person again.
Praise God. Yeah,
that'd be great. And love to.
Thank you.
I'm talking to Sean tomorrow, Pastor Robbie. So I'll ask him about the CIM, kind of your discussion with him about that. So he's mentioned it, but we just hadn't had time to talk in detail. But tomorrow is be an opportunity.
Tim, will it be all right that we stay for a while after we exit?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyway. Yeah.
Okay, Harris, let me ask you to, if you don't mind, close us in prayer.